Welcome to episode 9 of Talking Point on Wisp Sports Radio, where we delve more deeply into the systemic barriers facing women in sport. I'm your host, Lisa Ingerfield, and Talking Point is co-produced by myself and Wisp Sports. At Wisp Sports, we believe women in sport deserve equal coverage. Last month in episode 8, we talked to Karen Lofstrom about her 30 years of working to advance women and girls in sport. We learned about the successes she has seen, as well as the challenges that still remain. This month, we're excited to have Dr. Georgie Bruinvels, a research scientist for Orreco, joining us to talk about her research and work into our menstrual cycles and how they affect our hormones and other components of our life, and how that affects our athletic participation. Georgie is a research scientist for Orreco, a sports science and data analytics company, and the lead scientist for Fitr Women, which is Orreco's female athlete program. More specifically, Fitr Women works with exercising girls and women to help optimize training and performance around the menstrual cycle, to drive education and understanding, reduce dropout from sport, and importantly, to advance research in this somewhat under-researched area. Georgie has just completed her Ph.D. from University College London and has spent the last month on the road talking about the upcoming launch of the free app, Fitr Women, allowing exercising girls and women to track their menstrual cycle, educate them on what is going on in their body, while also providing training and nutritional suggestions based on where they are in their menstrual cycle. Welcome, Dr. Bruinvels. We are super excited to have you here and to learn more about your research. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation because a couple of episodes ago, we spoke with Dr. Nikki Brown, who I believe is a colleague of yours, and learned a little bit more about breast development and breast health. And what's interesting to me as I think about this issue is, you know, one of the driving forces or focus of Talking Point as a podcast is to really delve a little bit more deeply into these systemic barriers. And I often conceptualize systemic barriers as sexism, cultural influences, the way that the media represents women. And so it's been a newer kind of realization for me, even thinking about this, about how our physiology and our bodies and the physicality of our bodies affect how we engage in sport, women and girls and their participation. So I'm wondering if you could just start us off by talking a little bit about your research and what you found regarding the menstrual cycle.
Yes. So as you said, I have recently just completed my PhD. And through my PhD, I guess I started off focusing on iron deficiency in exercising women. And the leading cause of iron deficiency is actually menstrual blood loss, so menstruation. Those who exercise are already at an increased risk of iron deficiency anyway. And this is exacerbated in women because of the menstrual cycle and the increased blood loss. So I guess I started off sort of on this thread of going down the iron deficiency route, but it soon became apparent that actually the menstrual cycle is a huge issue for exercising women. And my first study actually involved speaking to 1,862 women and establishing firstly the prevalence of actually heavy menstrual bleeding, but also associating that with performance and seeing that actually the menstrual cycle affects so many women, yet very little is being done about it. And I think I found it so, and increasingly I'm finding it brilliant that people are talking about it a little bit more. So in 2016, Heather Watson, the tennis player, famously spoke out and said that her menstrual cycle had caused her to lose in the first round of the Australian Open. And it's brilliant that people are talking about it, yet actually we need to now do something about it and stop it being an excuse effectively. So I guess through my PhD, I always had this in mind, and I was always the common thread was let's try and establish, is heavy menstrual bleeding and iron deficiency one cause for poor performance, and what are the other causes that or what are the other reasons why the menstrual cycle can affect performance? And actually a study that we are currently working on has found that, so premenstrual syndrome, which is literally the presence of symptoms like headaches, nausea, vomiting, stomach cramps, heavy legs, backache, there's so many different symptoms, but up to 95% of women are affected by this. yet only 19% of them actually speak to their athletic coaches about it. And actually 3/4 of them say that they feel it hinders their performance. So there's this big issue that's going on and hindering people, yet we actually need to be doing something about it. We need to be educating people about what's going on, and also just, finding out how we can proactively act on it and help to reduce symptoms and just help people to feel better, I guess.
Gosh, that's amazing. So 75% of athletic women are experiencing those symptoms, but only 20% are actually talking to their coach or athletic mentor or advisor about it.
Yeah, so 92% are experiencing symptoms. 75% say it affects their performance. And then, 19% say actually talk to their coach, which is crazy.
Why do you think that is?
Well, obviously there's the historical taboo around menstruation, and people see it as a subject that's, it's disgusting, you lose blood, and, that sounds horrendous. And I know actually as a kid, I was so embarrassed by the fact that I had my menstrual cycle, and I was doing a lot of sport, and there was no way I would tell my coach about it. I wouldn't even tell my friends about it. So I think, there's the historical disgust around this loss of blood, but actually I think it's so important we stand back and we look at it as hormones are just changing in a cyclical process. And actually that's women are in a really unique position, and there's proactive things that they can do to reduce the impacts, or train smarter, eat better. And I really feel strongly about educating women and girls about this, and trying to help them to feel at their best and actually utilize their menstrual cycle to the best of their ability.
So are there a number of women and girls who are actually saying, when I get my period, I'm just not going to participate in sport?
Oh, definitely. And I think there's a historical opinion that premenstrually and during menstruation, you should get into bed with a hot water bottle. I mean, I've it really stresses me out if I look online and see some of these articles where it says, the best thing to do when you're menstruating is to get in bed and, just relax. And yes, actually, stress can exacerbate symptoms, but exercise has also been proven to reduce symptoms as well. So PMS is caused by, or thought to be caused by, an increase in prostaglandins. They're a certain type of a hormone-like substance which can cause an increase in release of inflammatory markers. So it can cause this inflammatory process. And exercise can actually act as an anti-inflammatory agent. So by exercising, you can actually reduce symptoms, and also exercise can help relieve stress, and it can just make you feel happier. So I think it's really, there are lots of historical beliefs which we kind of need to bust and make people appreciate that, that you can live a normal life with a menstrual cycle, and having a regular menstrual cycle is actually an indication of health, and it's not something to be afraid of, and it's actually something to embrace.
So, okay, yeah, because I definitely remember getting messages that when you're on your period, you really don't do anything. You should just relax. I mean, when I was younger, I didn't do as much exercise as I do now, but it's certainly something that has crossed my mind. And then I'm wondering, how many people have you encountered that actually get a direct message that it's wrong to exercise when they're having their period?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. That's not something which I've kind of actively researched specifically, but we know that a study that's recently been run by the Women in Sports Trust did a big survey of young girls and found that, I think it was something around 43%, I want to say, of young girls specifically don't exercise when they're menstruating. And, that's probably partly caused by historical beliefs, like what their parents say, or just they don't feel like it and don't realize the benefits that exercise can have.
So what I'm hearing you say then is there's this cycle, obviously, that happens monthly, and it's hormonal changes, and there is a way to kind of work with your cycle, work with those hormone changes to maximize your engagement with the world or your engagement with athletic performance.
Definitely. So we know that, so in the first half of your cycle, so from when you bleed and then for, say, the next sort of 7 days, your levels of estrogen, so there's two primary ovarian or female sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone. And in the first half of the cycle, estrogen levels increase and progesterone levels are very low. And we know that in the first half of the cycle, as the estrogen levels increase, adaptation to, so more like strength-based training, high-intensity training, has been found to be better than in the second half of your cycle, where if you think about it, so ovulation is right in the middle. So that's where your egg might be fertilized and your body kind of goes into slight protection mode to allow for the fertilization process to happen. So the kind of, I guess like your body just changes the whole time. But as a result of the high levels of progesterone in the second half of the cycle and this kind of protection effect, the adaptation to resistance training is less significant than in the first half. So actually we can be really, really clever and manipulate training around this. But that doesn't mean that on any one day an individual can't perform. It's more about, from a training perspective, what is the best thing that they can do.
That's real. I think that's so interesting and fascinating, right? Because when I think about training cycles and what we're taught as coaches and what we're taught as athletes and how, you know, we should do what exercises when, there's never any mention of how you can mold your training cycle around your menstrual cycle. And so that leads me to believe that all recommendations around training and coaching are kind of originate from what works for men.
Absolutely. And like you hit the nail on the head. So historically, back around the time of the First and Second World War, research was focused in men because there was concerns over damaging unborn fetuses in women. And I guess like over time, like this gender gap has just grown and grown and grown, because more latterly when it was established that actually like women and men are different and women have this cyclical hormonal I guess, process that happens that's way more dramatic than that in men. Firstly, that adds expense to research because more women are required for studies. Secondly, it's really hard to actually test women. Like you'd have to test them every single day. And thirdly, people don't want to go back and repeat studies that they've already done in men on women. So, for example, in the US, like 70% of drugs, like medical drugs, are withdrawn from the market through to side effects on women. And that's simply because they weren't tested in women. Like, it is madness. So I think, there really is a big gap. Like, yes, we're all trying, and it's brilliant that there's some really good research groups driving this area forward. But I just feel so strongly about, continuing to push this and just gain a better understanding. And I think, historically women have trained as men, but they're not men. Like, yes, it's a continuum, and the like levels of hormones that women have they're not all the same in all women, but women are fundamentally different to men. And I actually also believe that women training as men, girls training as boys is actually a big reason why not only women don't reach their full potential, but also why girls drop out from sport. Because if they're training with the boys, training as the boys hit puberty, get testosterone, get really, really strong. Girls hit puberty and can go through a sort of awkward phase. They're not training appropriately necessarily, and they get discouraged and drop out from sport. So I think that's a very significant thing that needs to be addressed.
So you're saying when girls hit puberty, because the results of puberty for girls are different than they are for boys, and with boys and their increased levels of testosterone, that kind of fitness or strength gap gets exacerbated or expanded, and that can lead to girls feeling like they're not good enough, and so they drop out. Absolutely.
I mean, it can affect their self-confidence and, just massively discourage them.
My goodness. Yeah. So really, this kind of cycle of engagement and who is or is not a quote unquote athlete, kind of those messages are embedded at very young ages.
Exactly.
And perpetuated differently, right? So perpetuated through the physiology of our bodies, perpetuated through media representations, perpetuated through messages we might receive from our family, friends, and other communities that we're connected to. So, gosh, it feels a little bit like there's just something coming from every angle.
I know.
That to undermine girls growing up and their engagement in sport, which then leads to a lack of women who are engaging at a high level
Exactly.
in athletic endeavors. Huh.
Yeah. And I think, if you step back and look at it and you think, oh my gosh, that's terrible. And it is, but it also highlights the fact that there's so much we can do. And there's so much, I feel really excited by it in a way. Like I was, over at the Prefontaine Classic in Eugene last week. And outside the entrance, Nike were running this Made to Play campaign, and they were just highlighting some key statistics around girls' activity in sports. And one statistic that they held up or had on a board was by the age of 14, girls are dropping out of sport at twice the rate of boys. And like that in itself just made me think like that is crazy. Like, and then another one, globally, girls are half as active as boys. Like that's nuts. So that's been, as you said, like embedded at such a young age.
Yeah, those statistics are pretty terrifying in many ways, in the sense of like, we need to do so much more, and we need to do it at kind of 4, 5, 6, young ages for girls.
Exactly.
So what is it that you're doing? Like, you have an app that's coming out, it sounds like, called Fitr Women. So how do you see that helping some of these things we just talked about?
Right. Well, so as you said, I work for Orreco, and Orreco have a real passion in the female athlete. And I guess when I first joined Orreco, we kind of quickly established that actually there's not that, well, we didn't have many female clients because there's not the money in female sport. And the CEO of Orreco, Dr. Brian Moore, has a real history of working with female athletes, as does Dr. Charlie Pedler and Nathan Lewis, who are the other key members of the science team. And I guess all of us together sat down and we established that, there is this real need to develop understanding in females, but also get the right messages to female athletes. So my colleague at Orreco, who is the product development manager, so she works on, the implementation of all of the ideas we come up with. We came up with the idea of Fitr Women. So Fitr Women effectively aims to help girls and women optimize their training and performance based on where they are in their menstrual cycle. But also through that, we have sort of four pillars or 4 aims, 4 goals. So to increase participation, to educate players, athletes, coaches, individuals, teachers, parents, like everyone, about the menstrual cycle, what it means, what's going on in an individual's body at any one time. Optimize performance. So as I said, like the aim of Orreco is always to optimize performance, and then to really advance research. As I said, like there is some really good research going on, but there needs to be so much more. So we feel very passionate about really developing this. And I guess we decided that the best way to do this is to create an app to, reach as many people as possible. So we've created this app, Fitr Women, which is free and available on both the App Store and on Google Play. And effectively through the app, an individual can log in and track their menstrual cycle, track their symptoms, their training. And then alongside that, they will gain information about what are the best exercises they should be doing training wise. Then some nutritional information, so top foods to include. So we know that in the pre-menstrual phase, it's really important to focus on anti-inflammatory foods because, as I said, like PMS is partly driven by inflammation. So you can really be smart with your diet and reduce your intake of sugary foods and, really proactively do something to reduce symptoms. And then we've done a lot of user feedback interviews. So again, my colleague Grania Kinefri is very one of her jobs is to go out and speak to as many people as possible. So we've been speaking to typical users and finding out what they would like to see, what they would like to learn. And we found that interestingly, I think it's partly a psychological thing, like girls like to know why. And if we can educate them as to why, then they're more likely to change their behaviors. So we've included a whole section on physiology. So actually, why is it that your heart rate increases at certain times of the month? Why is it that your breathing rate might increase or your asthma symptoms might be worse? So we've really kind of developed that as well. And then we also have a means to kind of share any like top tips or latest information. And I guess like the other actually quite key thing is to highlight times where risk of injury might be increased. So, for example, anterior cruciate ligament injury is already increased in women than men. But at certain times in the menstrual cycle, it's been found that this is increased somewhat further. So as opposed to saying to someone, watch out, you're going to get injured today, it's all about providing practical solutions and tips to reduce risk. So they might want to change their warm up or their warm down or their post training nutrition. So there's lots of things that we've kind of tried to capture in this app. And we're actually really, really excited about it.
Well, it just there's a lot that this app can do. So I'm excited to download it. And do you see that there's a difference between an elite athlete's, the effect the menstrual cycle has on an elite athlete and their training versus a recreational athlete? Does it change with age? Any themes that you've seen there?
So we know that like young athletes, for example, are more likely to have an irregular menstrual cycle. And part of kind of what we do is we also work on an individual basis with athletes who, might have a dysfunctional cycle. So they might have heavy menstrual bleeding, for example, or they might have another sort of, amenorrhea. So there are definite groups who are more susceptible to that kind of issue. But I guess like from an elite athlete perspective, yes. And we're actually currently just building an elite version specifically of the app, which will have a coach's version alongside it. But essentially the information is very similar. It's just, obviously the elite athlete doesn't have the opportunity to manipulate their training like more sort of recreational, or someone who's just not coached down to the T, would have more flexibility, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think about that, my own coaching training for triathlon, there was nothing about the menstrual cycle and what that might mean for my athletes. And then makes me also think about there was nothing on the menopause and how that could also shift athletic performance or kind of training schedules or what's needed. Have you addressed menopause at all, kind of as a connected issue?
Yeah, great question. So menopause and pre and postpartum are our next topics. Absolutely like a key thing to look at. And I think, very, very important. And again, the menopause is clearly something which is a bit of a taboo as well, and people don't really want to talk about it. So I think like part of the beauty of the app and something that we're very keen to utilize it for is to get the conversation going and get people talking about it, make it acceptable to discuss it. Or if there is a coached athlete, the coach can see where the athlete is in the menstrual cycle, so they don't have to publicly have the conversation as well. So yeah, definitely. In short, our next plan is menopause and pre and postpartum.
Okay, so I just want to ask a clarifying question. So if I download the app,
yes,
and then my coach has a coach app, can they connect with each other so she could see?
Yes, so like not right this second. So we literally launched this app on Tuesday. So it's all go, but we this is like the first version, but our heads are going down. We've got a meeting in 2 weeks to plan out the coaches version, and we're actually showcasing it in the UK, like a kind of prototype of it in a month's time. But the development plan is absolutely that we're going to have a coaches version. Because we really feel like that's necessary, but obviously we kind of, baby steps. I keep getting really carried away and wanting to build everything right now. But as I'm always told, I need to calm down a little bit and step by step.
Yes. I mean, I think that's brilliant, right? I'm just thinking about the fact that the stat you quoted earlier about how few, like 19% or so of particularly young women athletes are even talking to their coaches about this. Yeah. And so because of that culturally created embarrassment or disgust. And so this app could offer a means that the coach is educated and informed without perhaps the the athlete feeling like they have to have an uncomfortable or awkward conversation.
Exactly. And in fact, I've just come back from doing a bit of a round the world tour, talking about our work in the app. And I went to speak to a group of young girls, and like I've had such a range of different experiences speaking to different people, but in a way, this kind of really touched me the most. And I was in Australia in Melbourne, and actually Sonia O'Sullivan, who is just so inspiring as an individual, like arranged for me to go to her daughter's running club and to present to a group of girls there. And it was just so nice. It really brought it kind of back to reality and really to like the ground level of how much of a difference this can make. And some of these kids, like one of the mums came up to me and said, "Oh, yes, so I'm a little bit worried because I don't know if my daughter's started her menstrual cycle." I was like, "Well, have you asked her?" "Oh, no, we don't talk about that." And I was like, that's mad. That's absolutely mad. So like it really highlighted to me the power that something like this can have.
Gosh, yeah. So if you're not even talking about with your daughter
exactly
or in your home about menstruation, and then if there's a lack of education in the schools about what it is,
yeah,
and then that child is engaging athletically, then there's no wonder that they're embarrassed or ashamed or don't want to participate or can't talk about it.
Yeah, it's nuts. It really is. But it's exciting because there's so much potential. That's the best way to see it, I find.
No, I think you're right. And it is kind of, it's a little disturbing that we're in 2018 and that there's this, vast expanse of potential because we haven't quite addressed this issue yet.
Exactly.
And I'm thinking back to, there was a picture that was circulating on social media. It was either last year or the year before that. A young woman ran the London Marathon, and she was bleeding and she didn't wear a tampon or a pad or anything. And so you could see the blood on her running pen. And she did that purposefully to draw attention to the fact that it's not wrong. It's not bad. It's not disgusting. It's a natural function of being a woman. And yes, you can still run a marathon on your period.
Exactly. And it's actually like an indication of a healthy athlete, really. If they are menstruating, like many athletes don't, like it's thought that up to 69% of athletes in certain sports don't menstruate regularly. So, and that's regardless of use of contraception. So like that's huge. So actually like the regular menstrual cycle is an indication of health.
Yeah, and I've definitely heard that some women athletes who are training at a fairly high volume and intensity, their menstrual cycle will reduce or become irregular.
Yes.
And that's just kind of how it's been presented to me is that that's kind of a quote unquote natural consequence of being of working that hard.
Yeah.
But it actually is an indicator of something not working properly. Is that right?
Exactly. So, we work closely with a group in Boston at Boston Children's Hospital, Dr. Kate Ackerman and her team. And we've just done this big study looking at basically the effects of not menstruating regularly and having a low energy availability. And often there's a number of reasons why your menstrual cycle can stop or become irregular, but insufficient fueling, overtraining, excess stress, actually lots of travel can cause irregular menstrual cycles as well. But it's, we know that there are performance detriments based on not having a regular menstrual cycle. So I think that again, that's another area that really needs to be clarified, and people need to appreciate that, yes, an athlete may be amenorrhea they may be performing well amenorrhea is that they don't have a period. They may perform well in the short term, but then the long-term issues that surround that are very significant. And I think awareness really, really needs to be raised about that.
It just made me think of something in terms of engaging coaches or families in understanding the effects of the menstrual cycle on an athletic performance or interest in being athletic. There's a cultural narrative that exists that has been used to diminish women's contribution and engagement in the workplace or in other areas, you know, well, they're just PMSing, or they're just cranky because they're on their period. Do you have any concern or worry that with a coach in particular knowing more, understanding more closely the cycle and the symptoms, that those narratives might creep into the way a coach could engage with their athlete?
Great question. So the aim of the app and the aim of our program is, I call it the No Excuses app. So the aim is actually to provide information to get girls and women to the point where there need not be an impact. Like my nightmare, so I work with a number of individual athletes, and my nightmare is that they'll come to me and say, my Olympic final is going to fall on the worst day of my menstrual cycle. Nah, like our aim is to not let there be that variation in performance. So we don't want athletes to be reporting symptoms. We don't want athletes to be saying that they feel bad. We want to provide them with the solutions to stop that. And obviously, you know, I can't think that we're going to change the world and find solutions to everything. But, you know, we want to do our best to reduce that impact. And I think actually speaking to a lot of like elite teams and elite athletes, we know that often like the coach just wants them to be ready and able to play. Like all the coach cares about is for them to, and obviously the coach cares about their health, but the coach needs them to be on the pitch ready to go. So our job as applied practitioners is to support them with that and to provide them with the tools to get them there. So I think, yes, I like completely see where you're coming from, but I really feel strongly that the app has got to be a no excuses app. Our program is a no excuses program. Like we want to do everything we can to, you know, if there's a real problem, if there's a dysfunction going on. So if someone has like really severe pain or they are a heavy bleeder and that's affecting them, then we need to get to the root cause of it. So we can't just accept it anymore.
Yeah. So I like that kind of philosophy, the no excuses, in that it's not okay. It's particularly not okay for a coach to dismiss a young woman or a girl who's participating in sports based on knowledge of their cycle, right? Or based on kind of maybe these historically and archaic understanding of what it means to have a period. But conversely, right, that in many ways, girls and women, I think, have been taught to use their period as an excuse, and not through any fault of their own, but because it's been drummed in that there's something, while it's natural, it's also wrong and icky, right? And so you don't really participate, and so it's this weird kind of a cycle where you feel that way as an athlete participating in sport, then the culture kind of reinforces that, and then maybe you've had people be crappy to you because they accuse you of being moody because you're on your period. And so it all kind of feeds into this really like unpleasant reality that's almost like a house of cards, right? And it sounds like what you're trying to do is like disrupt that completely.
Exactly. I think, you know, we really, really want to emphasize the fact that exercising when you're actually menstruating is a really positive thing, and your menstrual cycle does not need to hold you back. So I'm currently working with the Women in Sports Trust in the UK to come up with some information and education to coaches and athlete support personnel to really hammer home the fact that, you know, you can do anything when you're menstruating. Like we need to change that stigma. And I think like myself, when I was 11 when I started my period, and I was a swimmer, and like the whole thing terrified me. And I wish that I knew now, like, actually that's okay. Like, you know, I can still swim. I can still do what I want to do. And like, obviously I realized pretty quickly because I didn't want to not train. But I think, you know, that awareness is really needed. And I remember at school when some of my friends would just say, oh no, I'm on my period, I can't swim today, or I don't feel very well, I can't you know, go and play netball. But it needs to, that, you know, I think that's a real area that we can really, really work on and change things. And I just feel so determined that we've actually got to do that. And, you know, now is the time. And I think people are embracing talking about the menstrual cycle, as I said earlier, a little bit more, like maybe elite athletes are, but like we can't like it can't be used as an excuse. And I understand why it is, because there aren't the solutions in place that are well established, but we need to get them out there. And that is definitely part of the reason for our whole Fitr Women program.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm just thinking that the example you used in school and your friends saying that they couldn't swim or they didn't feel good, they didn't want to train. Like if they are more educated through school or their family, then that's probably not a conclusion they're going to come to.
Yeah.
But if they do come to that conclusion and you have an educated PE teacher or a coach, then they can sit down privately with that young girl, and say, hey, actually, this isn't necessarily the truth. I know you might feel crummy right now, but going for a run or doing a swim might actually make you feel better. And here's why. Exactly.
And I think you hit the nail on the head with the why. Like it's the here's why that I think is so fundamental. And I also believe 8, 9-year-olds need to be told about this process that's going to happen to make it normal.
Yeah.
And boys as well.
Yeah.
We just need to appreciate that it is, as a normal, natural process that we shouldn't be afraid of.
Yeah, and your last point there about boys, I just saw something floating around on Facebook about the need to educate boys about the menstrual cycle and the period, because right now it's taboo even among women and girls who have that monthly experience, but it's even more taboo among boys. Exactly. And if you don't educate young boys about what this is and what it means and how natural and healthy it is, then the problem is just it's bifurcated and then exacerbated.
Exactly.
In terms of shame.
And if we think about it, the vast majority of coaches are men. And I think, I was at the LTA, so the Lawn Tennis Association Coaches Conference last year, and I would say at least probably 70% of the 400 coaches that I presented to were men. And I felt for them. I really, really did. Because they were like, well, what do we do about it? Like, how can we approach this? So then I was like, right, we're doing this app right now because they need this information. So I think, that it's really hard being working in female sport as a male. And I really feel for them because it's not something which many coaches find easy just to bring up. And I vividly remember a while back with one of my previous running coaches. I remember one of my friends telling him that she was on her period and she had really heavy legs. And he says something like, oh, well, you better go home then. That's mad. That's just crazy. She's an elite athlete. That's just not how it should work.
Right, absolutely. And then, I'm just the connected issue of the overrepresentation of men in coaching. That's a whole other podcast, right? In terms of why men dominate the coaching circles. But then you couple that with men and boys are not educated about the menstrual cycle.
Exactly.
It's considered taboo to talk about, or an invasion of privacy, or just not something that, then it just compounds the issue when they're coaching women athletes.
Exactly.
Gosh, this is so interesting. So what, for our listeners, Georgie, what would be, if you could give them 3 things to think about or take away or do related to your research and what you hope, and how you hope to change the conversation around athletic performance and the menstrual cycle, what would be your top 3 recommendations?
I mean, I could shamelessly say download our app, but I feel by downloading the app, or at least just educating yourself to understand the whys, is actually so interesting. Yes, I'm maybe a bit of a physiology geek, but I do just think it is actually really interesting and important to understand what, from both a female and male perspective, what happens in the body through the menstrual cycle. So I think to understand that is really, really important. And then I would say, just talking about it, making it a step. So all of our science team at Orreco are men. My researchers and my supervisors through my PhD were men. And I feel like we really kind of broke that barrier very quickly of discussing the menstrual cycle and just feeling comfortable to say, okay, it's a change in hormones through a typical 28-day process. It's not that, you bleed once a month. Actually, things are changing throughout the cycle. So look at it much more objectively and see that. And then I guess my final thing is just from a young kid's perspective, I feel just so strongly about like helping them to appreciate and understand. And, you know, for anyone who has kids, like just make it a normal discussion. Like I remember again, like speaking to my dad about it, he would still now, like, I don't think he can tell anyone what I do because I think he's too embarrassed to say it, which is crazy. And the funny thing is, I only realized when I was like just finishing my PhD that I have no idea what he's been telling the world I do when they ask. Not that he knows the world, but you know what I mean. So I think it is just like, yeah, I mean, it all comes down to awareness, being proactive, and just like, you know, thinking as a woman, like you're in such a niche position. And I also see like huge translation to the working world. Like, you know, there's many things that we can do around, not necessarily involving exercise from a nutritional perspective, from a lifestyle perspective, to really optimize ourselves and optimize our well-being based on this change in hormones.
Okay, so download the app, talk about it more, normalize the talking about it, and spread the love, spread the education.
Yeah, definitely, especially to kids.
Especially to kids.
They're the future.
The children are our future. Yeah. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Georgie, for talking with us today. I have learned a ton from you, and I'm very excited about your app. And I will include a link to the Fitr Women app in the show notes. And I am also excited to hear how your research continues in the coaching app that will be released later on. So maybe we could circle back around when you have some of those new products or those new ideas a little bit more formulated, and we can hear what you've been up to.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
You're welcome. Thanks again to Dr. Georgie Bruinvels for joining us today and for sharing her research into the menstrual cycle and its effects on women and girls' athletic performance and their desire to participate in sport. For show notes, including related links and a full transcript of the episode, visit wispsports.com. You can also find hundreds of additional podcasts on Wisp Sports Radio. Subscribe to us using your preferred podcast player, and don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes. For more conversations from the world of women's sport, including blogs, articles, and videos, visit wispsports.com. Post your comments, questions, and suggestions on our Facebook page, or email us at info@wispsports.com. And follow, share, and like @wispsports on social media. You can reach me, Lisa Ringerfield, directly at Tridefy, TRITODEFI, on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you for listening and supporting women in sport everywhere. We'll be back next month with another in-depth, thought-provoking conversation.